Okay, we move to our next talk, and it's a pleasure to invite Susan Weissman to talk about something that is very close to my heart, publish something on it. Susan Weissman is currently the chair of Judaic Studies at Lander College, a division of Torah College and University Systems in New York City. Her research centers on the role of the dead and notions of the afterlife in Sefer Hasidim. It examines the degree of penetration of Germano-Christian conceptions in these realms upon the thinking of medieval Ashkenazi Jewry and the pietists in particular. She has received her PhD degree from Yeshiva University under the tutelage of Chaim Soloveitchik, who shadowed here all the time. And her thesis, and this is brilliant news, is currently being published by Littman Library and will be titled Final Judgment and the Dead in Medieval Jewish Thought. The title of our talk today is Prayer for the Dead in Sefer Hasidim.
First, I want to thank so much the organizers of the conference for including me. And when I spoke with Elizabeth, when we first communicated, I told her how much this is at once so thrilling for me and at the same time so humbling for me to be in the room with all the greats of Sefer Hasidim who have occupied my mind for so many years. And I think it's wonderful that the first time I'm presenting is in a conference that's totally dedicated to Sefer Hasidim. So thank you so much. When dealing with material from Sefer Hasidim itself, it remains an open question whether or not the book reflects a unified outlook. And I wrote this way before I knew what Professor Marcus was going to speak about. Given the aggregate nature of the work, Megillot Nichtavu, and the tangled question of authorship, one might conclude that Sefer Hasidim is a composite work, as in fact David Shayevitz has suggested. With the exception of some passages here and there, personally, however, I think the book overwhelmingly expresses a single voice, that of Judah the Pious. After studying the topic intensively, I can unequivocally say that in matters of death and the afterlife, it certainly does, and somewhat surprisingly carries Augustinian overtones. Perhaps a useful way to address this problem of authorship is to test, through a series of thematic studies, the unity of Sefer Hasidim's thought on specific issues. With regard to prayer for the dead, Rav Judah advances a position that is at once univocal and unique. In several different passages in Sefer Hasidim, Rav Judah expresses the belief that the prayer of the living on behalf of the dead benefits them. In Rav Judah's mind, the living owe a great debt to their dead. Their prayers, offered regularly, protect the living from harm and accrue benefit for them. In this regard, Rav Judah puts forth a position very much in line with his medieval Jewish contemporaries. It is customary in 13th century Ashkenaz to pray and give charity for the dead in the synagogue on the Sabbath and on Yom Kippur. Rav Judah himself mentions the practice of praying for one's deceased relatives within the first year of their death. He explains the nature of the benefit accrued from prayer for the dead in relation to the amelioration of the suffering of Gehenna. The reciprocal relation between the living and the dead that exists in Sefer Hasidim is absent from the rabbinic corpus. Although several examples of prayer for the dead appear in the Talmud, some of which we will mention, the rabbis of the Talmud do not promote a belief in prayer for the dead, nor do they make explicit mention of any such contemporaneous practice. When it comes to prayer of the dead on behalf of the living, for the rabbis, it takes the specific form of the holy dead, who pray on behalf of a sinful Israel. However, these archetypal figures, the patriarchs and matriarchs, as well as the subject of their prayer, the collective known as Knesset Yisrael, are absent from Sefer Hasidim. Instead, it is the average dead who assemble annually to pray on behalf of the fate of individuals among the living. Similarly, it is the common man, the anonymous he or they, who prays on behalf of the average dead in Sefer Hasidim. In his conceptualization of prayer for the dead, Rav Judah adopts a position that is most similar to the early medieval pastoral model, which extends the penitential systems of the church into the hereafter. According to such a system, personal merit is stressed, as vicarious penance performed by the living on behalf of the dead only accelerates a process already set in motion by the deceased himself while alive. Citing a Talmudic passage from Chagiga 15a, meant to dispel the notion of predestination, Rav Judah reinterprets the passage in a novel way, such that it necessitates a belief in the transfer of merits from one individual to another, and endows responsibility upon the living to perform pious acts on behalf of the dead. At first glance, this is surprising. Other early medieval Christian models of prayer for the dead, as well as the Gaonic model of prayer for the dead, as formulated by Rav Hai and Rav Nisim Gaon, rely on the intercession of the holy and the privileged and the special dispensation of pardon. Both the hagiographic and monastic models of prayer for the dead, as well as the Gaonic model, are rooted in the ancient Roman system of patronage, in which the high-standing status of the intercessor, be he saint, monk, tzaddik, or Baal Schus, as the Gaonim record, secures a pardon before God for the sinful soul, regardless of the deceased's own personal merits. Apart from these precedents, which Rav Judah could have drawn upon, both Jewish and Christian, there already exists in pietist thought and practice a ready-made intercessor of this sort, the Chassid Chacham. The heightened role assigned to the Chassid Chacham in Sefer Hasidim as the master who is privy to the hidden will of God, the Ritzon HaBorei, and who acts as spiritual confessor according to the pietist doctrine of penance, renders him particularly well suited to be called upon to intercede on behalf of the dead, much in the same way that Cluniac monks fashion themselves as specialists in prayer for the dead. However, this is not the case. It is personal merit and individual responsibility, rather than the prestige of holy others, that form the basis for beneficial prayer in the work. With personal merit at the helm of prayer for the dead, questions such as who can pray for the dead, and alternatively, which dead can be prayed for, now rise to the surface. It is Rav Judah's passionate claims regarding prayer of the dead for the dead, and prayer for the deserving dead, that set him apart from Talmudic teaching, Gaonic positions, Tosafist commentary, and contemporary Ashkenazi practice, and align him most closely with the early medieval pastoral model. While Rav Judah believes that the living should pray on behalf of the dead, he states that the dead ought not pray on behalf of the dead. Only in this world, maintains Rav Judah, one can do pious acts to aid souls. One cannot do so after death. The Talmud in Chagiga 15b records how two rabbis, Rabbi Meir and Rabbi Yochanan, intercede after their deaths to save the soul of their apostate master, Elisha ben Avuya. The former brings his master's soul down into the punishment of Gehenna so that it can be purified and merit life in the world to come, while the latter, hoping to achieve even more for his master, pulls it up from there. Whereas the Talmud and Rav Nisim Gaon, who cites this passage, find nothing unusual about the two rabbis' conduct, each of whom explicitly remarks that he will achieve for his master's soul only, quote, when I die, end quote, Rav Judah does. Rav Judah tries to dispose of the problem by contending that there are unique circumstances to this case which render it an exception to the rule. Tosafot, too, in its comments upon another Talmudic story involving prayer for the dead, Sota 10b, is untroubled by the concept of the dead praying for the dead. Indeed, Tosafot contends that prayer for the dead, even when performed by the dead, is the most efficacious way of aiding the dead, and invokes the superior power of such prayer to resolve a contradiction in the Talmud. In resolving this contradiction, Tosafot fails to distinguish between prayer for the dead accomplished by the living and that accomplished by the dead. Both can equally rescue sinners from Gehenna. Rav Elazar of Worms also does not make any such distinction, and finds prayer beneficial for the dead when performed by both the living and the dead. Why then is Rav Judah opposed to the dead praying for the dead? Could Rav Judah here be reacting to the well-known miracle stories of the Virgin and tales of other saints, expressive of the religious climate of his age, that tell of the power of the holy dead to rescue the souls of the wicked from hell? This is assertion that the living must pray for the dead, not the dead for the dead, an attempt to neutralize such stories. Specific statements found in Sefer Hasidim support this line of reasoning. Reb Judah prefaces his assertion regarding praying for the dead, prayer for the dead to be performed solely by the living, with the following qualifying words, quote, specifically if he sinned and merited, but if he did not merit, it will not benefit, end quote. It is the hallmark of the Virgin's miracle stories and tales of the saints that in them not only do the dead rescue, but those redeemed are the most grievous of sinners. It is perhaps in response to this phenomenon that Reb Judah argues repeatedly in Sefer Hasidim that acts of piety performed by the living on behalf of the dead only benefit the deserving dead. This notion, too, runs contrary to Talmudic teaching, Gaonic discussion, and Tosafos commentary. The story in Sota 10b is once again illustrative in this regard. According to the Talmud, after the death of his renegade son Absalom, King David successfully prays for his son's redemption from Gehenna and secures his admission into paradise. The Tosafos, when commenting on this passage, are bothered by a contradictory Talmudic text and not by the sinfulness of Absalom, which gives them no pause. They resolve the contradiction by arguing that prayer is always helpful, even for the most reprobate of the dead. The Gaonic authorities, in their discussion of the topic, are also unconcerned with the spiritual state of the deceased. By contrast, it is precisely prayer for the unworthy which troubles Reb Judah in this text. Through a novel and forced reading of the passage, Reb Judah explains the permissibility of King David's action by transforming the wicked Absalom into a deserving dead of sorts. Why does prayer for the undeserving dead trouble Reb Judah so deeply when it fails to raise even an eyebrow for the rabbis, Gaonim, or Tosafos? Reb Judah himself provides the answer. Whereas in this world, he writes, at times God shows favoritism, in the hereafter he does not. The righteous dead cannot petition God to admit others, dead who are less worthy, into paradise, even a father on behalf of a son, nor even to shift from one partition within paradise to another higher one. Similarly, Reb Judah describes God elsewhere in Sefer Hasidim as a judge who does not accept bribes in the form of merits, who will never cancel out a sin because of a merit, and who will not pardon even the unintentional sinner. In Reb Judah's mind, it would be a perversion of justice were the saintly able to sway the course of divine judgment. In line with this thinking, Reb Judah neutralizes several other Talmudic statements in which certain righteous individuals, men such as Reb Preda, Reb Eliezer, and Reb Shimon Bar Yochai, claim to be able to exempt their generation or the entire world from posthumous punishment, or enable them to enter into a place of posthumous reward by qualifying those statements. He argues that the power of these great men to do so cannot possibly extend to sinners. Since these great men were all living when they uttered these statements, Reb Judah's qualification signals that he is denying the power of the holy, even among the living, to seek favor before the heavenly court and subvert the normal procedure of justice. Reb Judah's textual reinterpretations are clearly intended to counter the view of his audience, who, nurtured on the Midrashic tradition, would allow for such acts on the part of the holy living. Think of Moses always praying for Israel and seeking a pardon before God, and who would be untroubled by a simplistic reading of these Talmudic passages. Yet, despite his protests against aiding the undeserving dead, it is evident that Reb Judah's contemporaries did just that. In Sefer Hasidim, he states that a convert to Judaism who prays on behalf of his deceased parents will not succeed in lightening their sentence in Gehenna. Reb Judah's manifold repetition of the declaration that only the deserving dead can benefit from the pious acts of the living, along with his use of exaggeration in regards to charity given on behalf of the undeserving dead, and I quote, "Even if one gives a house full of gold, it will not be beneficial," end quote, attest to this reality. And this issue is not solely a Jewish one. The exemplar literature tells an incident involving St. Bernard, who tries unsuccessfully to halt a prayer for the damned. He tells a priest that his prayers on behalf of his sinful father are futile. Apparently, at least some medieval Jews appear to have acted in consonance with some of their Christian counterparts. Refusing to accept the notion that their departed loved ones cannot be aided after death, they reject the warnings of their respective pastors. Filial love knows no bounds, religious or otherwise. Furthermore, a desire to restrain unwarranted prayer for the undeserving dead could possibly be the reason behind Reb Judah's startling omission in Sefer Hasidim of the ghost tale involving Rabbi Akiva and the dead man. Although the tale is at the heart of the medieval Jewish practice of prayer for the dead and is familiar within pietist circles, Reb Judah omits it entirely from Sefer Hasidim. This omission could stem from the fact that the tale highlights both the moral degeneracy of the dead person. In one version, for example, the townspeople pronounce curses upon hearing his name. In another version, he is so wicked he has not even given a brit milah to his son, etc. As well as dramatic supernatural intercession of a holy man on his behalf. Rabbi Akiva fasts and prays for 40 days in order to open up the heart of the son, to be able to learn to say the prayer that would release his father from Gehenna. 2 points that Rav Judah finds highly objectionable in his concept of prayer for the dead. By contrast, Reb Elazar of Worms does cite the tale of Rabbi Akiva and the dead man in his Sefer Chachmat HaNefesh. In fact, it is the only ghost tale he cites in the entire work. He concludes that, quote, behold we see that prayer for the dead, behold we see that the prayer of a son aids his father to be released from Gehenna. In so doing, Reb Elazar breaks from the ideology of his master. Apparently, he is not in principle opposed to the redemption of undeserving sinners from hell. Rav Judah, on the other hand, despite the manifold ghost tales he records in Sefer Hasidim, fails to mention this one or any other tale of its type. This last point is significant. Beyond the omission of the tale of Rabbi Akiva and the dead man, whose message of redemption for the undeserving dead may be unacceptable to Rav Judah, the fact that no other tale in which the dead return to request aid in the form of prayer or charity from the living appears anywhere in the work may make an even louder statement. That the most standardized type of ghost tale circulating in 13th century Germany is absent from Sefer Hasidim must be more than just an oversight on the part of its author. This silence voices Rav Judah's position on the matter. While he permits prayer for the deserving dead, he wishes to limit its use. This limitation of reliance on prayer for the dead is also a prominent feature of the early medieval pastoral model of prayer for the dead. Its proponents preach the performance of good works in this world as the most assured path to salvation in the next, and de-emphasize a reliance on the posthumous aid of others. Therefore, by denying prayer to the undeserving dead and in limiting its application even for the deserving dead, Rav Judah, like early medieval pastors before him, adopts a position very much Augustinian in nature. Although a believer in the efficacy of prayer for the dead, Rav Judah is careful to restrict its benefit only to one who, quote, sins but merits, much as Augustine limits the efficacy of prayer, alms, and the Mass to only those who have, quote, earned while living the privilege of being helped by them afterwards, end quote. In fact, Rav Judah's categorization of the dead corresponds to that set up by Augustine and preserved in the writings of his contemporary Caesarius of Heisterbach. For Rav Judah, those individuals who, quote, sin but do not merit, parallel Augustine's group of the very bad, and Caesarius's supremely bad, for whom aid by the living is not efficacious at all. By contrast, those individuals who, quote, sin but do merit, according to Rav Judah, align themselves with Augustine's group of the not very bad, for whom suffrages performed by the living serve either to bring about a full remission, which corresponds to Caesarius' the moderately good, or make a damnation suffered more bearable, Caesarius' moderately bad. All these categories of sinners and the respective levels of posthumous aid punctuate the passages about prayer for the dead within Sefer Hasidim, but are absent from the writings of Elazar of Worms. While Elazar does promote individual merit as the basis for beneficial prayer for the dead, he fails to categorize sinners in terms of those who receive full benefit, those who can achieve only an amelioration of their suffering, and those who receive no benefit at all. And again, he does not object outright to the message of the redemption of the damned embodied in the Rabbi Akiva tale. While Rav Judah is certainly unaware of the fine points of Christian theology, the concepts of efficacious and non-efficacious prayer, of full benefit and amelioration of suffering, and of the deserving and the undeserving dead must have penetrated nonetheless. Taking the limitation of reliance on prayer for the dead one step further, Rav Judah advocates the voluntary assumption of fasting or other types of suffering in order to mitigate the posthumous punishment of even the deserving dead. Additionally, to the extent that the living assume this suffering upon themselves, the dead will be relieved from their torment proportionately. That is to say, if one suffers enough, he can completely release the dead from Gehenna. Mikabel alav tsar kedei lahotzio. Here, Rav Judah has created his own unique accountancy of the hereafter, predicated not on medieval suffrages in the form of prayer and alms for the dead, but on penance in true pietist fashion. Once again, citing Talmudic proofs for this assertion, Rav Judah does so by injecting into the rabbinic narratives a novel scenario of vicarious penance, an indication of just how alien his notion is to traditional Jewish thought. Turning once again to the passage from Chagiga 15b, Rav Yochanan, according to Rav Judah, successfully admits Elisha ben Avuya into paradise, not solely as the Talmud suggests, based on his prayer, but also, quote, possibly because Rav Yochanan accepts upon himself certain afflictions or righteous acts that are proportionate to the evils that Elisha commits. Likewise, Rav Shimon Bar Yochai can release the entire world from posthumous judgment on account of the suffering that he endured for 14 years alone in a cave. No other Jewish authority advances such a claim, nor interprets these passages in this fashion. For Rav Judah alone, penance is more potent than prayer. Thus, in the matter of prayer for the dead, the novelty of Rav Judah's position stands out, as Rav Judah draws distinctions that are entirely absent from Talmudic, Gaonic, and Tosafos discussion of the topic, lack saliency for Elazar of Worms, and stand in defiance of contemporary Ashkenazi practice. Moreover, the severe limitations which Rav Judah places upon the posthumous aid performed by regular others is compounded when viewed in light of his position regarding the supernatural aid of righteous others. Denying the privilege showered upon those who are closer to God, a privilege his co-religionists do not object to at all, Rav Judah rejects intercessory acts which subvert the normal function of divine justice, whether by the holy living or the holy dead. Instead, Rav Judah argues that individual merit alone holds the key to posthumous reward. Furthermore, by advocating the assumption of voluntary suffering as the best avenue for the posthumous aid of others, Rav Judah pronounces to all that it's through pietism, not favoritism, that one enters paradise. In conclusion, one can state that in the matter of prayer for the dead, all the texts of Sefer Hasidim have one and the same message. Speak in a single, unmistakable voice, that of Judah the pious, and not that of any of his predecessors or contemporaries, neither layman nor scholar, nor even that of his very own disciple.
Thank you very much. I'm sure you have many questions. So did I go? Sure.
Thank you very much. That was excellent and really interesting. So I have really two different questions. So one is, if I put it very simply, who goes to heaven? In other words, one of the things I've always been really interested in thinking about is we try to imagine heaven certainly through the eyes of Sefer Hasidim, who would be there? Would all Jews be there? We have people marked in heaven for completeness. That would be kind of one direction I push you to take us a little bit further. You started touching on it towards the end, but I'd be really interested in it. And the other one is to help me, since I'm much more interested in practice than I am in theology, at least when I look at these texts. And I'm trying to understand from the different distinctions you put forward what people practiced as a whole, as Ashkenazi Jews, what Rabbi Yehuda would have prescribed that people should practice, and where it differed. In other words, I understand the point we're trying to make about who should pray for the dead and who should be prayed for, but I'm trying to understand what people did and where what a Hasid did would be so different from what your everyday, your every man or every woman would be doing.
So in answer to your first question, in the eyes of Rabbi Yehuda, very few would enter paradise, and they would all be pietists. Every single ghost tale that he brings relates specifically to pietist practice. It's only those who sing the psalms, the Lashon Na'im B'Meshech, which are key pietistic elements of prayer, are visualized as being in heaven. Those who wear tallit and tefillin all day, also a marked pietist practice, are visualized in heaven. And lastly, the Hasid Chacham, who suffers on the behalf of others, who dies for his voluntary assumption of corporeal punishments, sits highest in heaven. And these are all standard monastic ghost tales in which the order highlights the greatness of their specific doctrine. They sit highest in heaven. So it is clear, beyond any shadow of a doubt, that only pietists will be in heaven. And that's part of the reason that fails to attract so many people. They don't want to be pietists, and they're pretty sure they're going to heaven anyway. Okay, in answer to your second question, I'm not sure I understand what you mean. Do you mean in terms of prayer for the dead? Is that what you're asking?
I mean in terms of practices around redeeming the dead and prayer for the dead.
Okay, well, the fact that he makes mention, as I said, to the practice that it was common for people to pray for their relatives within the first year of their passing, that was done. Charities given on behalf of the dead. All the standard medieval type suffrages were performed by medieval Jews contemporaneously. Now you're asking, would he do it personally? Well, he does allow it for the deserving dead, but again, he wishes to limit its use. He makes that very clear. In his mind, pietism is a much better way to achieve that aim. So if he would want to help out someone else after their death, he would probably assume voluntary suffering upon himself. That's what I would, assume he would do. That helps. Yeah.
Your talk was wonderful. I think your proposal of measuring authorship based on tracing themes and comparing is a great idea, and you've shown it today. I wonder whether theoretically you might go and look at this, this difference with Yehuda as a way of distinguishing different kinds of Teshuvat HaMishkal, where first you start off, and Elazar would share this, that the individual sinner enjoys a particular sinful experience through the Yetzer and then has to atone for it with a commensurate amount of suffering. Presumably we're talking just about the living. So Yehuda would take it further and say that a living person could take on a certain amount of suffering for someone who's already dead. Would you go then and define the sin of the dead person in Yehuda's mind as also a form of sinning through the Yetzer? That they're sort of comparable in the living and the dead in terms of what is balancing what? Or does it not necessarily assume that the sin of the dead that's being atoned for by the living vicariously would be the same kind of conception of the sin, of sinful pleasure through the Yetzer?
I would agree with you that he would. In other words, he views what happens in the afterlife as exactly a reflection of what happens on earth, and that's exactly what the pastoral model does. It just extends the penance, which is the natural office and duty of the priest to readmit the sinner into the church, grant him penance, and they take that same notion and just apply it to the hereafter. And it's just supposed to be speeding up a process that the dead did not get to finish on his own. So I would definitely think that Rav Judah would envision the same thing. Whatever he has in mind as penance for the living, he would do for the living to the dead. Yeah.
Last question by David, but first I want to take the privilege to short remarks. One, I think you answered to the Sheva. I think that Yehuda Hasid would accept only pietists to the highest degree of heaven. But there's other levels in heaven that it will accept other strata of society, Jews, Comets, whatever. I don't think he would not accept any other Jews in heaven at all.
I have another
We
chapter
can
on
discuss
that,
later.
in which he populates his hell very
Yeah.
quickly.
I also an article now in Harvard, the upcoming and the second remark is that the atonement that he offers for the living, not through alms and not through charity or prayer, but only through physical, aesthetic penance, is the most Christian thing there is. He's more Jesus than Jesus.
I agree.
Also, David.
Thanks for a great presentation, and I have lots and lots of questions, but I'll limit myself to just one. And just to follow up on Professor Marcus's point, and ask maybe if you can push it a tiny bit further. In some of what you were saying, I was reminded of a tension that I sometimes see in the way that Shabbat Mishkal is described, as whether the equivalency in Shabbat Mishkal is between the pleasure that you experience and then the penance you need to take on. Or there are times when it's implied that it's an equivalency between the punishment you will receive in the afterlife and then a way of preempting that by sort of preemptively giving yourself those same post-mortem sufferings through penance. And so I wonder if some of the points that you're making with regard to the way that intercession or the ability to intercede functions might help us think about a more complex way of thinking about Shabbat Mishkal in particular.
What would he prescribe to someone who wants to do penance for someone else?
Yeah, well, can we broaden the idea of penance in general as not only being about a relationship between the sin and the pleasure of the sin and the equivalent punishment, but also as bringing in the eschatological dimension of the person?
Well, he definitely views it, repeated over and over again, that one should accept suffering upon himself. He's constantly focused on preempting that suffering that's awaiting him. As far as what penance he would prescribe, other ghost tales that he mentions in the work always correlate with the Mida Keneged Mida function. For example, he brings a ghost tale about a woman who's the glove was soiled, right? There's another one who burns her hands and her eyes because she was leaving on Erev Shabbos instead of preparing for Shabbos. So every type of punishment is Mida Keneged Mida in the afterlife. So I would imagine that whatever penance he would prescribe to prevent a posthumous fate that's awaiting the sinner, he would try to have a Mida Keneged Mida function. That would be my guess.
Thank you very much.